Aloha.
Aloha.
We are live.
Mo mai kai.
Yay.
Yeah, oi.
Oh, I'm really good.
Oh, good.
Mahalo. So today I was so lucky to be here in your beautiful home in Puna area, and we were talking about divination, and you are such a amazing person in so many ways, and you know so much about Hawaii and Hawaiian culture and traditions and beliefs and so many ways. But not only, you have traveled a lot as well, and you have quite a background. I did quite a extensive research, like so many university degrees and all of that. So welcome. And this is a really nice new project I started, which is called Aloha Fairytales.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So you will be the first fairy tale to share your fairy tale.
Okay.
So thank you for being here. And today I have some questions which I think would really inspire not only myself, but also other people.
Okay.
And maybe you could tell us a very, short story. How did you end up in Hawaii? Like people who don't know. I know it's probably...
Okay, yes, making that short is going to be difficult. I was trained in the particular tradition of a Hawaiian family by my father, first of all. And so that was the initial thing. Grew up with a lot of Hawaiian influence, even though we were living much, on the mainland.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And things like my first ukulele, my first instrument that I chose to play was a ukulele. And my second was the Hawaiian's guitar. That just came out spontaneously. And so my father, I guess you'd say, trained with him for about 3 years before he died. After that, I was on my own for a while, didn't do very well until I joined the Marine Corps and to get myself straightened out. And while that took me from where I was in a farm in Michigan to California, where the Kahili family lived. And they were the ones who had adopted my father when he was a young man. And they called me and I went to visit, and thankfully they adopted me into the family. So then my real training began. But I actually didn't get to Hawaii because I had to finish college, finished all of that, took a job in Africa, where I also worked with African shamans, and for 7 years. And then when I came back is when I started training with my Hawaiian uncle. Now, while I was in the Marine Corps, as I mentioned, I was working with my Hawaiian auntie. The family lived in Long Beach. A lot of Hawaiians after the Second World War moved into the mainland. And this particular family was one of the ones that went to Long Beach. So I worked with her during my time, my free time. And then after all the other adventures, I came back and finally was able to go and visit Hawaii.
When was that?
The first visit was 1975.
Wow, it has changed a lot since then.
Oh, yes. Very great deal.
And which island was the first island you came to?
Well, what I did was on the first two trips, we took a group of people. So we visited all the islands.
Uh-huh.
And then I spent some special time with my Hawaiian uncle on Kauai. And then later, when he found that we were going to Hawaii 4 times a year, when the children had grown up enough, my wife and I decided it was time to move here.
Yeah.
So we did, and we've been about 32 years in Hawaii.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what was your first impression to go to Hawaii after you had been learning so much, about the culture and all the family connections and so on?
Well, of course, the first impression is emotional.
Yeah.
Did
you cry?
Gloria did. My wife did.
Yeah.
I'm a man. I'm
Yeah.
going to cry. But I felt it very, very deeply.
Mm-hmm. like homecoming.
homecoming.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
And
Nowhere else. I've traveled all my life, literally.
how many countries you have traveled to?
Oh, over 50.
Wow.
Yes,
Yeah. I've traveled to 30 countries, and
Yeah.
Hawaii is my spiritual home too.
that's right. It's
Yeah.
ours,
Yeah.
definitely.
So when you came here first time, did you, like, many people when they come here first time, doesn't matter when they came first, they really feel one of the first differences is that they feel the presence of aloha. How was it with you?
Yes, you'd have to say that. And it came about, and I'd have to say, in a very particular physical way for us. We had just moved over to Kauai. We had gone to pick up some furniture. I had a little small car that Honda hatchback that I had. That's what I had, and so we couldn't get all the chairs into the car. And there was a local man next to us with a truck, and he says, "Put the chairs in the truck." And he says, "That's okay." And so, all right, if you're sure about it. So we piled everything in the truck, and we led the way up to the North Shore. We were living in temporarily in a place in Princeville, and unpiled all the stuff, and asked him, where did you live close by? No, he said he lived in Waimea,
Wow.
which is on the opposite side of the island.
Yeah.
So he had just spontaneously, full of aloha,
Uh-huh.
gone way out of his way
Mhm.
because he saw us that we needed help, and he
Did
helped.
that.
That's
Yeah.
aloha.
Yeah.
See? So it was much more than a feeling.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
saw it in
Action.
action.
Yeah. Very
Yes.
cool. So if you kind of recall going back to that time in the 70s, what was Hawaii like during that time?
Well, it was a lot simpler.
Yeah.
A lot simpler. We have to talk
Easier.
about Kauai in particular, but a lot simpler and a lot less expensive.
Mm-hmm.
We could do inter-island from the Princeville Airport to Honolulu for $25 one way. And so we would go over there, and we could attend shows, and we could do shopping, and it was worthwhile. And on the island of Kauai at that time, there was very little traffic. There was one fancy car, and it was an old Mercedes that somebody owned. And there were lots of parties, lots of events, and everybody dressed up Hawaiian style. Any kind of big event, it was a concert or anything like that, where the women would wear muumuus, the big long gowns, and leis, of course,
flowers.
always leis. And, men would always wear shorts, but, good looking shorts. And I wore shorts the whole time there. Yeah. Not bright colored stuff, not for the formal gatherings, but otherwise, all the time it was shorts and t-shirt was mostly what we wore. Mm-hmm. Okay, but like I said, lots of parties, lots of friends, and we opened a museum of Hawaiian art, which you can see some of that around here now, up in the North Shore, and had that for quite a number of years.
Yeah, it was really amazing to come to this workshop here and find like anthropological, display
yes,
of
right.
many, Hawaiian artifacts and also from other places in the world. And with my anthropological background, it was a feast for me for you to tell all of these things. So it is, I think, as an anthropologist, our mission in many ways is basically to conserve culture,
yes.
and also kind of, help the future generations to, treasure it, really value it. And I think you do it in such a beautiful way.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And in my vocation, I'm a psychologist, but in my heart, I'm an anthropologist.
Yeah, so we are from the same tribe. Yeah. So you told me also that you are also familiar with hula, and have you danced hula too? Or?
Yes, I have. In fact,
part of Hula
when
in Kauai.
When I was a child, in Los Angeles.
Oh, wow.
My mother sent me to a dance school with my sister to learn hula.
Wow.
And so I was the only boy. And when it came time for making a presentation, I was not allowed to, because boys weren't supposed to dance hula.
Oh.
That was the thinking at that
Yeah.
time in that place.
But originally, men were dancing.
Of course, that's clear. And women too, you know. Funny, a lot of people still today say that women didn't dance the hula, and that's just not a fact of history.
Yeah.
Okay. But anyway, I learned how to do it then, that old. And then I had mentioned before, learned Hawaiian instruments and
what about
did
Hawaiian?
dance the hula here and played. We have our own halau on Kauai. And so for a while when I was living there, I would do the ipu for the group. Yes.
Yeah. And what about Hawaiian language? We talked a little bit about.
Yes, we talked about how difficult it is. I've been continuing to learn.
Yeah.
You know, all through these years.
Yeah.
And I'm still learning.
What's difficult about that language? What do you think for you?
For me, I think if I were to name one thing that is the most difficult, it would be that more so than any other language, I've studied many languages and I speak several fluently. But Hawaiian is tough. I would never claim fluency. The most difficult thing, I think, is the importance of context. You know, even in English, context is important to understand some things, but in Hawaiian context, it is important to understand almost anything.
Yeah.
Because so many words that are vital to the language have this multitude of meanings that don't seem related at first glance, and trying to keep track of all of that. The differences in knowing relationships, the differences in having about a dozen forms of possessives.
Yeah, and even like where you use okina, you know, in the word, you know,
there's
or
that
sentence.
too.
Yeah,
yes,
it's so complicated. Yeah.
The okina is not so bad. The hako is the one that really gives a lot.
Yeah,
because you're not always sure where to put that.
Yeah.
So it makes it a challenge, but it makes it continually fascinating.
Yeah, because you can learn and grow all the time. Yeah.
That's right.
And you also told me, as I'm a really passionate paddler, that you also were part of the canoe club.
My wife and I were part of the Hawaiian Canoe Club.
Yeah. Yes. And how long were you part of the club?
For almost all the time we were there in
nice.
Kauai, which would have been close to 20 years.
Wow.
Yes.
So how was your experience as a paddler, or like what's like, did you have any special?
Well, I do have one special occasion. We went out to paddle with another boat. There was one man who was rather arrogant, you'd have to say. He was not Hawaiian, but he was the head of one boat. Mm-hmm. And so we had the second boat. And I was paddling. I was not in charge of it. However, I decided to try something that I had learned. And he wanted to run a race. He had specifically picked all the best paddlers for his canoe. And then just kind of like spontaneously decided that we were going to have a race back into the mouth of the river. And I said, okay. You know, the people in our canoe were all upset. And I said, no, this is what we do. I had them do it as best as possible, but I was doing it. We were going along, and he was, of course, ahead of us. And what I did was create with my mind I suppose there's a term, we could call it a thought form, of two porpoises pushing our canoe. And I didn't tell everybody exactly what I was doing, but our canoe gradually got closer and closer and passed him, and we beat them.
Whoa.
The best part was how upset the other guy was.
Yeah. You should use that next time in the race.
You might try it.
Yeah.
Very interesting effect.
Good tip.
Yes.
Yeah, very cool. So with all the university studies and all the traveling, you just told me a very interesting fact that you studied so long and it took a while until you started to teach. So tell me a little bit about that process.
I first learned how to start teaching a lot earlier than that, just the process of teaching. In the Marine Corps, I had the job of teaching people different aspects of their work. And so it wasn't the teaching itself, but I had to teach this knowledge, this esoteric knowledge when I first came back and I began teaching, I had a group of people, and I taught them a class on this Kahili family tradition of the esoteric knowledge. And for make it a simple term, we called it Huna. Huna can mean, people interpret it as secret, and in a way it is, but it means really hard to see.
Mhm.
That's the esoteric knowledge. It's there, but it's hard to see. And so Ike Huna or No'ea Huna would be a more common term, but to make it simple for non-Hawaiian, we just called it Huna. And so I taught a 9-month course. And at the end of the course, my wife, who'd been with me all these years, I didn't teach her anything in Africa, but when we get back, she said, okay. And she and a bunch of other people came up to me and said, what is Huna actually?
Yeah.
After 9 months of trying to get it across.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to go back to what we might call the drawing board
Mm-hmm.
and create ways of getting the knowledge across that would be much simpler, techniques that would be simple and understandable, and ideas, and put them in the framework of modern life so that they could be understood. My psychology degree helped me a lot in that. So I just had to redo it until it became easier and people understood more, and the whole thing was more effective.
Mm-hmm. And so now, recently, you don't teach that much anymore. You said
No,
you kind of retired.
No, I'm not retired at all.
Yeah.
People think that.
Okay.
What I've done is, first I stopped teaching overseas,
Uh-huh.
and then in 1917 I gave my last big course here in Hawaii. And now for 2018, with everything that was happening in Hawaii on Big Island,
Because of the
Hawaii,
lava.
yeah, sure, and lots of stuff. So I didn't teach that at all. And then began teaching again this year in short classes for specific things that I enjoy. But mainly I'm putting more focus on my writing. My writing and putting together, I have a tremendous amount of material, and making that material available to people. So this is still working. This is still teaching in a way.
Yeah, you can travel to places you don't need to go physically or something.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And now you also have online classes and things, so people can download.
We have online courses, yes,
Yeah.
that people can download and,
Yeah.
and learn the knowledge. And I'm always open to questions. So I do a lot of question and answer on Facebook,
Mhm.
and post things for teaching people there, articles and things like that. So yeah, I'm not retired.
Yeah, okay. So then we got that correct.
Right.
So with all the different countries you have traveled, you have learned so much about spiritual ways of looking at life. We even talked today about, how people and cultures approach abundance and like
Yes.
different spiritual ways to connect with the spirit world. What's like your favorite like ways of like perspectives to see life? Out of all of these places, I mean, it's a huge question, but
I'm not quite sure how you're relating to that, to places.
yeah. So you were in Mongolia, and
Right.
you were in China, and like
Africa.
different places. So is there any of those places which kind of stands out with something specific?
Look at Africa,
Yeah,
just to get a perspective.
yeah. It's so
Uh,
big.
It's
many
so big,
countries.
so many countries, so many languages.
Yeah.
It's very hard to be specific. I can take
Yeah.
individual instances of things
Yeah.
that happen. But overall, I'd have to say the time I spent with the shamans of Mongolia,
Oh, wow.
which was, of course, very specific, and worked with them on healing and going to ancient spots, and they learned a lot from me. I participated in many kinds of ceremonies, and it was very, very moving. The way they dealt with people, the way that they worked to heal them, the way they reacted to my way of doing things. I'll never forget. I did a Hawaiian chant for a gathering of the shamans one time, and after the chant, they thought, well, that was very strange, very different, and they liked it, but I seemed to move my hands around a lot. And that was strange to them.
Oh, cool. So I have also studied and done a lot of research about shamanism, and spirituality as such has been one of my main like interest focus points for like over 25 years or so. So now recently I have met several people who are teaching Hawaiian shamanism. And what's your take on are we able to learn about Hawaiian shamanism and become one, or is one born as a Hawaiian shamanism
Well,
shaman?
obviously, you don't have to be born as a Hawaiian shaman. Practicing shamanism is practicing shamanism. Now, the thing to remember, especially in the Hawaiian context, is that different families had different ways of teaching, different words for certain things, different kinds of things that they taught. So again, we have here, it's almost like Africa. It's not a homogenous society. And so learning from different people, different aspects and different ways of doing things is important. When we say shamanism, that word is very loose today and used in much more general ways than it used to be. But
did Hawaiians even use the word shamanism?
the closest word that you could come to, which is what my Hawaiian family called it, was kalakupua. Now, kalakupua is translated, generally speaking, as magic. Okay, and it's based also on the word kupua, which would be although there's lots of fantastic, wonderful legends and tales told about the kupua, it's probably the closest thing to what we might call shamanism, okay, which remember now is a Tungic word from Siberia that we're trying to apply to all these different people. And so the archetypal shamanic figure, because of the way he acted and the things he did, was Maui. Okay, Maui, they generally called Maui the demigod, Maui the trickster. Maui, he did all the things that typical shamans do in other parts of the world. He went on journeys, he went out to visit the gods, he played tricks on them, he brought back skills from the inner world to share with people. He talked to spirits, he talked to birds, he changed shape, all these very shamanic things that he did, and he was called Maui Kupua in Hawaii. Okay, so we look to him as the archetypal shaman of Hawaiian style.
So many people have heard about kahunas. So what do you say? What's the role of kahuna?
Kahuna is a whole different thing. Okay, if we look at the language, basically we've got kahu, which is actually a word generally used for caretaker. Okay, and the head of something, because it's the head of taking care of something or some group or some process or something like that. The na is what's generally called a nominalizer in Hawaiian. So kahuna is one who takes care of. So the kahuna were the closest thing in the equivalent would be like a PhD, because they specialized in certain aspects of Hawaiian culture. A kahuna would be one who is caretaker of knowledge.
So he's passing it on.
That's right. And so it would be the master, someone who has mastered a certain area of knowledge. So people who come to Hawaii and they're looking for a kahuna to heal them. Well, down at the beach, the big kahuna used to be the best surfer on the beach, Kahuna Nalu. And that's not exactly what they're searching for. Well, okay, then you've got the kahuna fisherman, then you've got the kahuna variety of different types of healers, and then you've got the kahuna for this and that and the other thing. The word kahuna by itself just means a master of. And then you have to finish it with another word. It's like PhD doesn't mean anything unless you say PhD in what field. Well, kahuna is very similar.
So I heard from some old Hawaiian cultural stories that when a baby was born in a family, oftentimes it was like, whether it was observed or they kind of knew from the beginning that, okay, this person will have mastery in certain things. And then this child was like kind of guided or supported in that process. And sometimes it even had a situation where maybe that baby was born in the kind of Y family, like close to the ocean, but then had like a mastery of like, I don't know, carving trees and stuff. So
Sure.
had to go to that family there and kind of got adopted into that family. So
Yes.
yeah.
So that was one way.
Mhm.
Okay. But because not every child could be foreseen that easily as to what they
Yeah.
were going to be good at, there was also the process, which is very Hawaiian, of testing,
Yeah. So you
Okay.
try different
like
things.
in oi. And so the child would be tested by one of the ways when they were very young would be game playing.
Mhm.
So there were lots of different kinds of games that the children played and were encouraged to play. And then you'd have the elders over here observing and seeing which ones were good at fishing, which ones were good at guessing how many pebbles under the sand pile.
Mhm.
And then they'd be kind of guided based on their natural inclinations. That was probably the most common way to do it.
Yeah. So now, as you have been in Hawaiian culture and also learning many new things, how is it you feel is a Hawaiian way to learn things? Because I have had many interesting experiences with that. I would be really interested to hear your.
Well, okay.
Can I come with an example?
Sure, give me an example.
So I'm learning now to become a steersman in a canoe.
Oh, okay.
So what I have been doing, I've been sitting in a double canoe in like next to the steersman and just observing what they are doing.
Oh, yes,
And
of
then
course.
after like some time, I actually start to do it. So
That's right.
I give a lot of time to observing, or the thing what you said about hula.
The
you
same.
know?
Yes,
Yeah,
that's
when you
right.
start in
You
the back
begin-
row.
You begin by observing.
Yeah,
That's right. And
imitating.
imitating,
Yeah.
exactly. And so that's a very definite way to do it.
Yeah.
And this is how the children would learn when they go to help with as much as they could, depending on their age, pulling in the nets. They would be encouraged not just to go down there and pull the net, but to get the whole context,
Mhm.
what was going on.
Yeah.
So observation, very, very important. Yes.
And I had one experience when I went to a Hawaiian language class, and I just had a blockage. Like I couldn't like learn it because I was approaching it with my Western mind, you
Yeah, it
know,
doesn't work.
give me the grammar and give me the,
Right,
how it
right.
works. And then you said today that, Hawaiians didn't have past or future tense. So
That's right.
like, how do you make sense, like from my mindset? So
Sure.
very
And
challenging.
their view of relationships was so
Yeah.
totally different from,
Yeah.
from the Western. Yes.
Yeah. So today we were also talking about ways of do divination and things. And Hawaiians probably had so many different ways. Could you mention one way they were doing, like trying to figure out what spirit has to tell?
Well, like a lot of people in different places in the world, they used a system. It's generally called odd even, but it's more appropriate to call it odd odd. It was called oipahu. And oipahu really means odd odd, but it's two different kinds of odd.
Mm-hmm.
See? So it's using pebbles in which apparently the practitioner would put the pebbles in a particular gourd that was called ipu olelo, the speaking gourd, that it would use to give the information. And you take two things, a person, and you make two piles of pebbles, one representing the person asking for either help or an outcome or something like that, and the other pile for the outcome.
Mm-hmm.
And so the practitioner would make one pile for the person and another pile for the outcome, random amounts of stones, and then pick two out of each pile until there was either two or one or none left. Okay, one or none was the same thing, and then pick two out of here. Okay, now if the one from the person was even, forget it. That's not going to work.
Yeah.
Okay, not going to be a success.
Mhm.
Okay, and it wouldn't matter what was over here.
Mhm.
If they were both even, that didn't work either,
Mhm.
because the word even is kaulike,
Mhm.
and that means the same or balance. So there's no change, there's no
Mhm.
progress. Right? So odd plus, but odd plus odd. Why the problem with that is this kind of odd was a bad odd. That's pahu,
Mhm.
and this was a good odd. They would kind of cancel each other out.
Yeah.
But if you had odd for the person and even for the outcome, that was good. That was success.
It's like so simple
Yes,
in
right.
so many ways.
Yes,
So I also really like how you were explaining today, when people want to see like what future brings and, connection to the past, how we should actually approach the future. Can you
That's
say
right.
some words about
Well,
that?
first of all, the future doesn't bring anything.
Yeah.
Okay. In the most practical terms, the future doesn't exist yet. Okay. And it's based on our imagination and expectations. So that means that in order to have something happen in the future that we want to have, we have to plan it in the present. Plan it or plant it, either way. And so then this is where we work. And when we do divination or we do computer simulation or anything of that nature, we feed
weather forecast, like you said.
weather forecast too. We feed data from the present in some way, pebbles or software,
Mhm.
and then we project a potential outcome. And you must remember it's a potential outcome.
Mhm. So you can influence it.
That's right. You can influence it, and life can influence it.
Mhm.
Okay, weather can change.
All the factors.
All the factors that have so many factors. So what you can get is a probability reading of some sort,
Mhm.
right? And that's good, and that can be helpful, and you work with that. But then you have to be ready to change at any given moment
Mhm.
because conditions change.
Yeah.
Okay, so the future isn't fixed, and nothing comes to you from the future. When we get ideas and images and inspirations, we're picking up based on existing conditions, probabilities, and we can change our behavior to influence those probabilities in one way or another.
So can you influence a hurricane?
A hurricane? Oh, sure. This is one of the things. We have an organization of people around the world, and we connect. And so when there's a hurricane coming, or when there's a fire here, or something's happening in the world, well, let's take a hurricane. What we do is there are different ways that I've taught how to interact, but we use something that works for us and influence, try to persuade the hurricane to go this way and that. Now, when we're doing this, we have to find out first what the hurricane's willing to do.
Mm-hmm. If it's a cooperative
that's right.
hurricane.
Well, no. Any hurricane has its own inclinations.
Yeah, own direct.
That's right.
Direction.
But those are never just one.
Mm-hmm.
So it might decide to go north or east, or it might decide to go west or south, or it might be able to have those as possibilities at a given time. And you, as somebody who's trying to influence, will pick the one that is the least harmful to human beings or nature, if that's the case, and kind of like put your intention, energy, feeling in that direction. And since it's almost like we had an expert come into our yard and tell us how to work with plants. And one of the best things he said was, first of all, you have to find out what the plant is willing to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you help it do what it's willing to do, it will grow for you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Same is true.
Which is completely missing in most Western approach. So
that's right.
We just like bulldoze over things
that's
and
right.
do what you do.
That doesn't work very well.
No.
So it's just like the guy said about the plants.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing is about the hurricane or anything else you're working with.
Or volcano, which we had last year.
Now, the volcano is a very interesting one. You have to
Different
know what
animal.
something is willing to do. It's not different. We've been able to influence sometimes in some ways, but let's call her Pele. Pele means molten lava, by the way. And she was going to do what she was going to do. And so people made up all kinds of things. Well, Pele was angry about this and angry about no, she wasn't. She's a volcano. She spews lava. That's what she does. We have decided to live on a live volcano, and we're in her path where she's gone before. So she's not angry about anything.
Yeah.
She's just saying, doesn't even pay any attention to us if this is where she wants to go.
Yeah.
So all that trying. It's good for legends and it's good for stories and it serves a purpose, but you got to remember, she's not human. Okay.
So you also lost your house, right?
We lost our house, yes, and very surprisingly, in a way that was totally unexpected, the speed that was totally unexpected. But the thing I point out to people, especially when we compare it to disasters elsewhere in the world, we suddenly in 24 hours. Well, the whole thing took longer than that. So they totaled it up. But in about 24 hours, 2 communities were completely covered. Okay? Completely covered. And all in all, 700 no homes. I think the significant thing is that not a single human being was hurt directly by the lava flow. There were a couple of people who got in the way, but that's a whole different thing. And some people were hurt, some got too close while dangerous things were happening. But by itself, the lava didn't attack anybody. Okay, and I think that's highly significant. With that kind of an eruption over such a wide territory, and nobody was killed. Okay? Can't say nobody. Plants, animals suffered a great deal. Okay, a lot of them were helped as much as possible. Fish, that was a big change.
Yeah, hot ponds.
And that was the hot ponds disappeared. So there were some things happened that could be called harmful, but harm wasn't the point.
Yeah, and the new beach was great.
The beach, right?
Yeah.
So it wasn't done for harm. It was done because that's what Pele does.
Yeah, natural process.
That's right.
Yeah. So I'm so fascinated every time I meet someone who has had a very long and happy relationship. And how long you have been married with your wife?
Let's see. Now, we got married in 1961.
Wow.
So you can figure I keep forgetting whether it's 57 or 58, but this year might be 58.
So what's your key?
I've
asked this for so many people.
Sure.
Yeah.
No. It's actually very simple. You have to love what you like more than you don't like what you don't like. In other words, what breaks up most relationships is criticism. When people start focusing in a relationship more on what they don't like than on what they do like. And that's deadly. We compliment each other a lot. We hug each other a lot. We hold hands wherever we go. We think that the good parts of each other are the most wonderful thing in the world. Things come up that sometimes that we don't agree on, but we don't dwell on them.
So you agree to disagree?
We agree to disagree sometimes, yeah, right.
Peacefully?
Peacefully. But the main point is we don't criticize each other.
Do you hold grudges sometimes?
No grudges whatsoever at all.
No need for
ho'oponopono? No, not with us.
Yeah.
Because we have no ongoing grudges. We resolve stuff.
Right away when it
resolve stuff right away, and one of the ways to resolve is to make a compromise, and another way to resolve is decide that's just not important. So one or the other of us will most often do that. Okay, the love is more important than this little bitty thing here.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yes.
Yeah. And then also I think very many people are always like looking for more answers and tips about abundance. So you shared some with us today. Is there something which stands out you say like this is something it's good to focus on?
Yes.
what's your like tips or tools, like you say, like
Oh my goodness! Now we're talking about giving a course here.
Yeah.
Okay. Here I'm going to have to refer to the books that I've written, where I put a lot of this stuff down.
yeah, in there.
Especially for that type of thing, the book I've written about manifesting, including abundance, is just simply called Hula, Ancient Knowledge for Modern Times. And in there, I give all kinds of tips and ideas. And my favorite that I will mention here is the Master Formula for Success. And so I write about it a lot and talk about it. But simply speaking, it's a formula somebody else used for something different. And so this one is slightly different from that. It's E equals MC squared minus R. Okay. And energy equals. Because when you're doing a mathematical equation, both sides have to equal out. Okay. So energy, we don't say energy, effectiveness equals motivation multiplied by confidence, multiplied by not cooperation, but focusing. Actually, it's concentration. Okay, so motivation multiplied by confidence multiplied by concentration minus resistance. So what you've got to do is work on all those elements.
Okay.
And as you increase motivation, effectiveness increases. As you increase confidence, as you increase concentration, as you reduce resistance, that's when you do it.
Get forward.
That's right.
Yeah. And you are one of the few people who has actually visited Estonia. Can you say a couple of words about that?
Oh, what I can say is...
What year was that?
Oh, that was quite a long time ago. It was in the 70s, I believe.
Oh, wow.
But we enjoyed it very much. A very beautiful, beautiful city. And
so you were in Tallinn, right?
Yes, we were in Tallinn.
And
we did a little bit of the countryside.
Oh, okay.
And we saw there were sad things while we were there that we saw. Department stores had practically nothing in them.
Yeah, it obviously was still communism.
That's right. But just what was beginning to happen, things were just changing. There were market people were selling their farm products on the sidewalk in different places that hadn't been allowed before, but that was starting to come up at that time. And so there were some difficult parts of it, especially as we traveled around and the state of the buildings and things like that. But there was a spirit that was very strong and growing toward independence. And we could feel that. We met some people who were working on that.
Yeah. And can you tell me that story you told about the map? That was like really funny.
Right.
I've never heard of it, about the story.
Well, right. In Tallinn, there was a visitor brochure given by a local visitor organization. And when I first looked at it, there was a statement that said, we apologize for everything not being the way it ought to be and for things that don't seem to be finished or things like that. But we can't do anything about it right now. Didn't mention anybody.
Yeah.
So then when I looked at the map of the city, there were all these blank spaces that didn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Until Gloria and I started walking around the city, and we happened to notice that in every one of those blank spaces was a Russian building of some kind, and official government or religious or something like that. And they had just left it out of the tourist map.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah, that's quite a story.
Yes.
Yeah. So to wrap it up, do you believe in fairy tales, or can one even ask that? Like, can we believe in fairy tales?
Well, of course, but what does that mean?
It
means you believe in fairy tales.
Yeah.
So
do you believe we all create our own fairy tales?
Well, of course, I'm a psychologist. I have to believe that. And try to live by them.
Yeah.
Yes, right. But you see, most fairy tales have good endings. It's very popular in modern times to make fairy tales with bad endings, just to show that you're different. But the whole point of the fairy tales, we're teaching stories. And that's true here in Hawaii, as well as anywhere else in the world. That's right. In Hawaii, they call them fairy tales or legends. They had a couple things. They were to teach manners, to teach how to behave in certain circumstances, but teach how to do things too. So an old-time Hawaiian legend would be all night, maybe, because every time you talked about something, you also, the storyteller would tell how it was done. So if you're talking about the salt marsh on Kauai, well, you had to tell how salt was collected and what was done and what were the processes. If you're talking about fishing, you had to talk about the different calories and the different kinds of fish hooks and all of that. So these were teaching stories as well, things that were, even though people had practiced them, heard them, this was an oral tradition, so they had to be reinforced from time to time. The knowledge had to be presented and represented. The original forest stories were like that. They weren't just for amusement, but they were also for amusement. Now, the ones you give yourself, hey, they're your fairy tales.
Yeah.
Make them good.
Yeah. Make the ending you want to see.
Make the ending you want. Have the things happen inside them that you want to do.
And become the messenger of your story.
That's right.
Yeah. So when people are wherever they are in the world and they see this, what would be your aloha message to them?
My aloha message. Okay. I'm going to take three things that will help you in any situation. Bless the present. That's aloha. Pay attention to the good around you. Make that important. Enjoy it. Appreciate it.
Amplify it.
Amplify it. Trust yourself. There's no point in not trusting yourself. Okay? That means you're going to be dependent on somebody else. If you trust yourself, what? Okay? Trust yourself to do the best you can at any given moment. You don't trust yourself to have done it right after the fact when it didn't turn out. You don't know it. You have to trust yourself to do the best you can in any given moment. And that has to do with mana. And then you expect the best. Because it serves no good purpose whatsoever to expect the worst.
Yes.
Okay? Expecting the best is going to help you take advantage of the best of whatever happens. And maybe even bring more of the best. You'll be able to see the best. Whereas if you're expecting the worst, you're not even looking for the good. That has to do with a special meaning of pono. Okay. So bless the present, trust yourself, expect the best. That's my message.
Yay. Thank you so much for your time and all the knowledge you shared today. And I am so blessed and I really appreciate this time we spent together. And
thank you.
And it will go out there. So
okay, mahalo.
People,
I really appreciate it. I enjoyed it.
Thank you.